Welcome to the Animal Training Academy podcast show. I'm your host, Ryan Cartlidge, and I'm passionate about helping you master your animal training skills using the most positive and least intrusive approaches. Here at ATA, we understand that navigating the vast challenges you encounter in training requires a comprehensive base of knowledge and experience. It's common to face obstacles and rough patches on your journey that can leave you feeling overwhelmed and stressed. Therefore, since 2015, we've been on a mission to empower animal training geeks worldwide. We've aided thousands in developing their skills, expanding their knowledge, boosting their confidence, and maximizing their positive impact on all the animal and human learners they work with. We are excited to do the same for you. Simply visit www.atamember.com, join our vibrant community, and geek out with us. And of course, in the meantime, enjoy this free podcast episode as we explore new ways to help you supercharge your training skills, grow your knowledge, and build your confidence, so that you can craft a life that positively impacts every learner you encounter. But we will start today's episode where I'm excited to be talking to Shane Gorbett. Shane is a specialist in animal care training and behavior management with extensive experience across leading zoological institutions and global professional communities. With a background spanning roles at the Columbus Zoo and Aquarium, Busch Gardens, Tampa Bay, and currently the Philadelphia Zoo, they've worked hands-on with a wide range of species while developing and implementing evidence-based training and welfare programs. They also serve on the board of directors for the Animal Behavior Management Alliance, the ABMA, where they are deeply involved in advancing choice-based behavior management and positive reinforcement practices worldwide. As the host of the ABMA podcast, Animal Behavior Conversations, they regularly engage with experts to explore the science of behavior change, animal welfare, enrichment, and training. Passionate about mentorship and professional development, they focus on building collaborative, growth-oriented teams and inspiring others to improve animal well-being through thoughtful, ethical training practices grounded in the science of behavior. So without further ado, it's my very great pleasure to welcome Shane to the show today. He's patiently waiting by. Shane, thank you so much for taking the time to come and geek out with us here at Animal Training Academy.
I could not be more excited to come out here and geek out about animal behavior with you, Ryan, and the Animal Training Academy community. As someone who just listened to every episode that you had out, I'm a little behind now, but spent 2025 catching up on all the episodes and all the great learning. So excited to be here and hopefully contribute something that's valuable to other people.
No, definitely. I'm not at all unsure that you will be delivering on that today. And that's mad. You host a podcast show. Do you find it mad when people are like, I've listened to 270 pieces of content there, or whatever number ABMA is up to that you've created? I mean, that's mad. And there's so much gratitude for listening.
I just love it. I mean, as someone who does a podcast, I can understand all the time and thought that's put into and the care for every single episode. So I always enjoy helping to support other people that are putting in that effort, but also as someone who is a self-proclaimed behavior nerd and getting to listen to other people. And my work is mostly in a zoological setting, but what I love about your podcast, it exposes me to all different kinds of behavior and thoughts and thinking. And I'm a firm believer that every part of it can somehow be used in whatever situation you're in, be that with domestic animals or exotic animals in a zoological setting. So I always love learning new things and coming up with some new ideas in unexpected ways.
Yeah, awesome. Well, that's what when I say we, I really mean I, but I do have Phoebe dog sitting on my lap. So that's what me and Phoebe hope that people take away from our show, that behavior is behavior for all earthlings, and rather than or rather than necessarily thinking about dogs or horses or zoo animals, we just think about Earthling and how the laws of behavior operate here. So it's great feedback to hear you say that. Thank you. And for those listening who might not know, now's probably a good opportunity as we're talking about it to tell them a little bit about your podcast show.
Yeah, so as Ryan mentioned, I'm on the board of directors for the ABMA, or the Animal Behavior Management Alliance, and we're a not-for-profit global organization that's focused on enhancing animal welfare through training and enrichment and other behavior management uh, portions of the field. And our organization is really about sharing that knowledge and progressing that knowledge so we can continue to grow how we care for animals, continue to focus on the science and understanding that it's changing constantly and we need to be adaptable in how we care for animals as we learn more. Let's do better. So, as ABMA, we have a lot of resources, and one of the resources that we have is a podcast. And that kind of came up from the fact that I was super fortunate when I started my career to have an incredible mentor, Wouter Stillard, who spent the time with all of us that were newer joining this field to really teach us the science. And from him, my entire worldview was changed from learning about the laws of behavior and the science of behavior change and everything that goes into training and enrichment. So I was really fortunate to have that baseline and someone to teach me that. And then as I continued to grow in the field, I went to different teams at different institutions. I realized that not everybody got that, and how lucky I was to have a mentor that had such an incredible grasp of the science and a passion and ability to teach that really well. And during COVID, I think as a lot of us kind of had a little more time on our hands, I was first introduced to podcasts. And I thought, you know what, this is a really great way that we can help to spread resources about the science of behavior change, because some people learn from reading things, some people learn from watching things, but some people can best get that knowledge from listening to other people. So that's kind of where the idea for Animal Behavior Conversations, the podcast of the ABMA, came from. And the name was from the ABCs of behavior, Animal Behavior Conversations, a little bit of a nerdy title there. And so really just taking that concept, and the focus of ABMA's podcast is kind of threefold. First is breaking down the science of behavior change. So we have episodes where we take a term in the science, and I have a fantastic guest on that we break down what that science means, but then also give practical examples of that to help people understand how it works. So we have episodes about that. We also do offshoot episodes focusing on behavior in general, so enrichment and welfare and kind of what that looks like, where the science is today, and where we're at and where we're going in that realm. And then another one of our kind of three focuses is a series that is called The Behaviors of ... And that's where we talk about the human behaviors and the science of behavior change on the human side of the animal care field, and having some really interesting conversations about the behaviors of making meaningful change, or the behaviors of partnering for success with your peers and your superiors. So kind of also talking about using that science that we use in positive reinforcement training, operant conditioning with our animals, and how can we use that knowledge to be great leaders and also great peers to our fellow humans. So that's kind of where the ABMA podcast came from. And we are available on all major streaming platforms. We typically release on a bi-weekly schedule, unless my life gets crazy and I say that we're on a little hiatus. And we've got a lot of really great people that are on. So if you're interested in really diving into some of that science, check out Animal Behavior Conversations.
Yeah, I highly recommend it. It's one of my favorites. And what an incredible opportunity to have Wouter Stillard, as you mentioned. And I realized as you're talking, I was reflecting on this memory just popped into my head of Wouter at the Birds of the World show in Dallas, Texas, and him getting Rob's, I can't remember Rob's last name, from Natural Encounters. But him getting his wallet and some like metal straps and like screwing it down to like At this stage, Rob couldn't take his wallet away. And I realized I started laughing. I was like, oh, crap, I hope Shane's not um, thinking I'm laughing at what he's saying. But Vada is just such a great human, having so much fun on the job, but also being so skilled in both his technical knowledge and his technical application. How important do you think having a mentor like Vada was for you in your animal training journey? Because you said you didn't really, did I interpret this correctly? You said you didn't really realize that until you left and you went, oh, other people don't get that. Because I didn't have that. I would have loved to have that.
I feel so fortunate, and I actually felt a little bad because at the this most previous ABMA conference this March in 2026, I was just kind of talking with Wouter, and I forgot to kind of tell him just directly that he was really the inspiration for starting Animal Behavior Conversations, the podcast of the ABMA, because it was that thought of me, exactly what you said. I didn't realize just how fortunate I was to have him with all of his knowledge and then just his genuine passion to help spread that. And he wants every single person that works with animals to have that knowledge. And that was just so at the forefront of everything we did. And just because being at the Columbus Zoo Aquarium in the animal programs department, where he was a director of animal training and behavior, we just had such a culture of the science, and everything we did was just completely seeped in it. We talked about it, we used all those terms, and it's because we had that culture that he was really instrumental in building and coaching us through different training projects. And so when I moved to another team and I realized that not everybody has that, and most people don't get that type of incredible, knowledgeable person that is so willing to teach them. And so it really did, one, start me out on an incredible footing with the science, but it also inspired me to be just like Wouter and just be so giving of the information and taking that time, no matter what it takes, to make sure that whoever I'm with, and at this point in my career, who I'm mentoring, who I'm coaching through, just really taking the time to, one, get to know how they learn, two, set them up for success, and three, coach them in the way that is going to be successful for them. And that might be just giving them a lot of direction, but it could be letting them try. That's one of my favorite things about Wouter as a mentor, is he was really great about, hey, here, what's your idea? Yeah, let's try it and see if it works, because that's how behavior and learning works. And so I really took a lot of his mentoring and what I learned from him, what I modeled from him, to then be able to be a great mentor to other people. So yes, you're completely correct in stating that it was just so instrumental. And I do feel so privileged looking back that I got to start my career with Wouter as my mentor. And now I get to call him a mentor and a friend, which is really great.
Amazing. And before we go on, gratitude to Vada for playing his part in you starting your podcast, Animal Behavior Conversations. It never occurred to me that that was ABC. And I always just had to laugh at myself for coming up with the Animal Training Academy podcast show. So kudos to you guys for being more creative than the Animal Behavior Management Alliance podcast show.
Yeah, that's our little nerdy Easter egg in there.
Yeah, it's cool. I love it. So thinking back now, because I want to move on to the main topic we're going to talk about today, but I always enjoy hearing about people's behavior odysseys, as we like to call them, their journeys. So you left Columbus Zoo and then you went to Busch Gardens, Tampa Bay. Maybe tell us a little bit about your time there and kind of what was poignant for you in terms of your personal journey.
Yeah, so at that point in my career, I had that really incredible base from the Columbus Zoo and Aquarium, and I was just ready for that next step. And it was actually Wouter who knew the supervisor of Cheetah Run at Busch Gardens Tampa Bay, Justin Gardner from ABMA, and Justin had a position open, and Wouter said, hey, this would be a really great opportunity for you. And I remember being really hesitant because I'm from Ohio. I went to school an hour and a half away. The Columbus Zoo Aquarium was an hour and a half away from my home. That's what I knew. And I was really fortunate that he did push me to take that step, because I can look back now and also say that I am a better trainer animal caregiver and leader because I had multiple different mentors throughout my early career and different teams and dynamics and all those things. So I was really fortunate that I was encouraged to take that leap. And at Busch Gardens, Tampa Bay, when I was there for the first time, I worked at cheetah runs. So we had a live presentation where we shared space with cheetahs and we would do training on the habitat with them, but also would do a cheetah lure system and a running system. And I was really fortunate for that because one, it taught me a completely different skill set working with free contact with a large carnivore and really honing in on the animal's behavior. That was like what I really took away from that time, was really just paying attention to every single little aspect about them. And I always tell people I have like a Mount Rushmore of animals that taught me the most. And on that Mount Rushmore is, I guess that's more of a, if you're from the United States, in case you're unfamiliar, it's a giant monument that has 4 United States presidents on it. But on that, top 4 is Kibisa, the cheetah. And she's the cutest cross-eyed cheetah you've ever seen, but she was a fast runner. And I really fell in love with her, and she taught me so much because she was an animal that in a moment she would change. And it was so subtle, and it was like, took me a while to really even be able to describe what I was seeing to other people in the small movements, like the way her eyes were positioned, like her ears slightly twitching, her body language. And from that, I really just taught me to watch and learn how to communicate with an animal. And the way we do that is by listening to them through their body language. And what I really enjoyed about Kibisa was she found tactile reinforcement, especially, nice little rub under her chin, as a very high reinforcer. However, she also sometimes found you crowding her space an aversive stimulus. And it really was learning her behavior of the subtle little things of her inviting you in. So she would invite you in to share that space with her and give her that tactile reinforcement. And I was able to form a really close bond with her. I did a lot of really cool training with her where maybe others on the team had to kind of build that up. And it was almost like this unspoken thing. And I remember that one of my former coworkers, Alexis, years later, she still works with those same cheetahs. She texted me and she was like, I saw it. I see Kibisa now. Like I fully see and understand her, like what you were saying, like I've got there. And it was just really exciting. And her relationship then grew a lot from that. So I was really fortunate there. And then also that was my first foray into being a mentor. So I was really grateful that the supervisor at the time, like I mentioned, Justin Gardner, saw potential in me in that leadership and really gave me a lot of that background and that ability to be that mentor. So I was able to start learning that. And that's really where my big passion came from, with helping to be a mentor and starting it right there. So it was a really great experience for me to step out of my comfort zone.
I like that Mount Rushmore metaphor. I have to admit, I momentarily stopped listening to you because I was imagining my own.
Right.
Because there's a wedge-tailed eagle and a southern hairy-nosed wombat in my Mount Rushmore. How many heads are there? 4.
There's 4. Yeah, it's really hard and really grows on you. Just because I mentioned, I'll say that my 4 are Judy the red river hog, Ray the radiated tortoise, Kibisa the cheetah, and Chitsai the sea lion. Those are my Mount Rushmore of my 4 animals that taught me the most.
Now to actually make your Mount Rushmore materialize in reality.
Yeah.
That's pretty amazing. And what a cool experience too, and what a great sounding teacher Kibisa was. And then from there, you were lucky enough to move to your current position, which is
the Philadelphia Zoo. Yeah. So my journey was I'm actually one of the, I probably not common that I went to Busch Gardens, went back to the Columbus Zoo, and I was able to help open the new pinniped habitat that we had. Then I went back to Busch Gardens again and was able to be a senior keeper and then the supervisor of the Edge of Africa, where we had hippos and hyenas and lions and ducks and ring-tailed lemurs and some fish. So it was a really great opportunity there with so many different animals. And that team, the Edge of Africa team, was so incredible, and they were just so primed for learning and being progressive. So they did an incredible job. And then now I am currently at the Philadelphia Zoo because I fell in love with someone from Philadelphia. And so now I am here at the Philadelphia Zoo, which is America's first zoo. So it's a really historic, cool place with a lot of really innovative parts to it. We at the Philadelphia Zoo, I say we, even though I wasn't part of the team then, but we're the trailblazers and the innovators of trail systems. So creating spaces for animals to move throughout the zoo, go to a different habitat, go over guest pathways, and just giving a vertical, using all that vertical space to allow animals to locomote and do some incredible natural behaviors. So I'm now at the Philadelphia Zoo, and I'm a senior animal care specialist on the events and swings team, which in my current job, I focus a lot on behavioral husbandry, and I work on our Kids Zoo U team, which is our ambassador animals, the reptile and amphibian team, and also the bird team. So lots of fun variety.
Yeah, and paint a picture in people's heads. I'm thinking I haven't been to Philadelphia Zoo, but interacted with keepers that have worked there and have seen images, and I've got an image in my head of like a visitor pathway with a tunnel over the top of maybe a lion or some other large
Lions and tigers, yes.
carnivore walking
And
over
now
your
bears,
head.
oh my. We just opened a brand new bear habitat that has the first trail system for bears. So had to throw in that little pun there.
Are you a Wizard of Oz fan?
Oh, is that what lions, tigers, and bears, oh my, comes from? I actually
Yeah,
had no
it's when
idea.
Dorothy's like skipping down the path with the lion. I'm pretty
Oh my
sure.
goodness. See, I didn't even understand your reference.
Do you
I
know what
thought
the
that
Wizard of
was
Oz
just
is?
a yeah, I mean I enjoy the Wizard of Oz. I just didn't know that's where it came from. I just
I'm
thought it
pretty
was one of
sure.
those
Maybe I'm wrong.
colloquial things that we say.
I think it's Wizard of Oz. I might be sounding really clued up on my film trivia right now, or really naive. We'll find out after the
Yeah,
podcast.
I'm more of a behavior nerd, not a cinephile nerd, but that's obviously showing through here.
So I wanted to. Me and you had a catch up last week. That was fun. We just randomly talked about data collection in our catch up last week, and using data in zoo collections to make evidence informed decisions. And we talked about that purely because I was curious to hear your perspective and to learn from your experience on that topic due to some work that I'm currently doing. And what you shared with me was just so interesting. And I reflected on it being valuable for our audience, especially those working not only in zoological collections, but in collections of animals. So that could be a shelter with dogs. But then, as I'm saying this out loud, I'm also thinking valuable for an individual at home who has an individual animal in their care, whether that be a dog or a horse or a parrot. It's just so valuable in general. And so let me start by asking you, in your words, when I say evidence-based decision making and data collection as it pertains to work in zoos or with collections of animals, and when working with behavior specifically, because obviously we can collect data about a whole range of different things, what does this mean to you? What does evidence-based decision making and data collection mean to you, and why is it important?
Well, I'll start with what it means to me. To me, it means that we are truly listening to the animal, and the way we do that is through their behavior. And the only way that we can truly do that is if we take out as much emotion, hypothesis, guessing that we can, and let data do the talking for us. And I know we just talked about him, but kind of where I'm at in my journey was started from Wouter Stallard and his mentorship. And we would really focus on Dr. Susan Friedman's Unlabel Me campaign through behavior words, which is not labeling animals. And in discrete trial training, when you're doing those training sessions with an animal, it's really easy to say, yeah, don't label an animal and say, oh, they're not doing this today because they are stubborn. Instead, look at your ABCs. What is the consequence? How are you setting them up for success with their antecedents? But I think that also flows into where I look at this evidence-based model for making interventions on behavior. It's really allows us to not put those labels out there and put our guesses, because we can postulate all we want about why an animal is doing something or what they're doing or how they're spending their day. We can guess that an animal that is arboreal is spending a time in a tree. But one thing that in the zoological field, we have a lot going on, and typically we don't always have the time to watch an animal all the time. And so, how do we really know that that arboreal animal is actually spending their time in a tree? And the only way we can do that is by getting data. And I also want to shout out the Columbus Zoo and Aquarium's Welfare Committee. When I was there in 2022, when we were first starting this entire welfare process at the zoo and really defining it, we were lucky to have Dr. Kelly George and Zach England from the Ohio State University. And now Dr. George is the executive director of the Zoological Association of America, ZAA. And when we were starting these welfare assessments, it was really easy for us to say, hey, an animal needs shade. And we can check a box and say, yes, our habitat provides them shade. But how do we know if that's good shade? How do we know if the shade we're providing is where the animal spends their time, where their resources are? And that's only through collecting data and letting the animal show us. So by really focusing and having that mindset of, yeah, we can check a box, but the only way we can know that if that isn't just a checked box and it's really an actionable item that makes the animal's life and welfare better is by getting data and seeing how the animal is using it, how the animal is behaving in that environment with that specific thing we're looking at. So I think, to me, evidence-based data and collection is us listening to the animal at its fullest, because it takes us out of it. It takes all the ideas that we have that quote unquote should be good for an animal. Like a habitat, we can look at it, study natural history, put it together, do an enrichment item, etc. But the only way we know that it's good for that individual animal is by listening to them and listening to their behavior and letting that do the talking. And ultimately, that's why I think it's also really important, because one of my favorite sayings is behavior is the study of one in one moment. And each individual is going to be different, and we can have a general idea of how a species behaves, but we really need to keep that in the forefront of our minds, that that individual animal or group of animals that we are working with are individuals, and they're going to need different things. And by getting that data and watching them, observing them, that's how we can truly give them the best life and improve their welfare.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing all that. And we've got some really cool examples I want to talk about. I want to just pause before we do and give a little bit more context for the listener of why I really wanted to talk to you about this today. And I'm thinking, Shane, back to a really cool experience, and I spoke to you about this last week. I had in, I don't even know, 2014 or 15. We brought out Val here, rest in peace, Val, who's no longer with us. But she did amazing work with an organization or a model called The Shape of Enrichment. And she came out to Wellington Zoo in New Zealand. I went to, I can't remember how long it was, 3 or 4 days. And we came up with enrichment items. We collected data on the animal's behavior before enrichment. We collected data. Then we gave them the enrichment, and we collected data after. And that was really my first experience at doing that in a zoological context. And I was very inspired, Shane. And I had big dreams. That I was going to change. I was going to go back to my organization, and I was going to, because I wasn't working at Wellington Zoo at the time, and I was going to, implement everything I learned and share it with the staff, and it was going to be amazing. And you know what? I had a folder, but like nothing else happened. And we can, at this organization, lots of organizations, we did something that you mentioned there, which, we tick boxes. We've done enrichment. Yep, tick a box. Without any idea of what the actual goal of that enrichment was. And if we achieve that goal, and how do we know if we achieve that goal? We'll need to understand behavior before and after enrichment was offered. And it was a little bit demotivating for me. I felt unmotivated to do enrichment just so I could check a box, um, which conflicted with team members who thought that that was valuable. And I'm not saying it's not valuable, but this is where I really wanted to kind of dive into today, because what you said, for the listener, is valuable and inspiring, um, and I just observed that it clashes with reality in terms of resources, skill, know-how, to actually implement this on the ground in not all places, but a lot of different places. But you really interested me last week. And for the listeners of the show, I mean, Shane inspired me to take massive action on some projects I'm working on. And I shared with Shane what I come up with between now and then. And as I was using Microsoft to automate data collection, thank you, Shane, for that tip. Create a form, and that form will then automatically create graphs that we could show people, which would hopefully act as a reinforcer. I've started to realize how hard it was to actually set up the formulas in Excel, and I just could see all of these little friction points where an implementation of a project could break down. So again, what really interested me about talking to you last week is you've had success. You've had success at getting programs off the ground from scratch, and you've had success in terms of improved welfare, as a result of those programs. So that's what I really wanted to talk to you about today, Shane. About those. Let's just focus on those two projects. I've got some macaws we're going to talk about, and some hyenas, and talk about how you went from having a problem that you wanted to solve, considering that data was an important part of the equation, getting that data, and then what the outcome was. So maybe we can start with the hyenas. And also, before you talk about hyenas, if you want to add anything to this problem that I've voiced, that I see and that I've had, please feel free to do so before we dive into the examples.
Yeah, and what you're mentioning, I think, is something that all of us are going to run into, that quote unquote roadblock at some point in our career. Where is my dog coming through in the audio? Okay, cool, perfect. Sophie's a little bit louder than your co-host Phoebe. Anyways, we all can kind of run into this roadblock, and it is that, as you mentioned, this can be something that clashes with reality. I liked that phrase that you said, because with everything that we do, especially if we're talking about in a zoological setting, in a day, we do a lot of different things for animals, and a lot of that time isn't necessarily spent on a computer putting in data. So it's something that we have to kind of get creative with. And what I'll say to people that maybe run into that roadblock and they're feeling a little demoted, I can relate to you so much because I have been there. And where I kind of took my motivation was, you know what? I'm just going to try to do this myself. That's one thing that I've had a lot of success with, starting something new or something like making a change is, hey, here's what I want to do, team. Here's why. At first, I'm not asking for any of your time, your help, your resources. I just want to know if you think this could be something that I could trial out, see how it goes. I'll put this on me. And so by being someone that was going to do it up front, what I have found is if you do that work and if what you're doing is something that is a great change, the animal's behavior is going to prove it. They're going to show it. And when that happens, you're going to get your team on board, because at that point, it becomes less of a, we don't have time, or that's so-and-so's idea or project. And it can become more of a, wow, do you see how the animal's responding? Do you see how they're behaving differently? Do you see this massive success that we're having? Do you see that now our enrichment that we're giving is reinforcing us as a team because we're able to see the animal do something we've never seen them do? And, you can have that cascade on and on. So really what I'll tell you is that it isn't easy. I'm not going to sit here and say that this is an easy thing to accomplish, but when you do something that is a good change, the data and thus the animal's behavior is going to show that. And that is the best way to get your team on board, is instead of it being your idea or your project, it's, hey, look what the animal was able to accomplish. Look what the animal achieved because of the work that we put in. So by really putting that focus and that mindset on the animal's success, the animal's living experience, I've found that you can get a lot more buy-in because it takes it to that just next level, because that's what ultimately all of us are there to do, is we are there to give the animals the best life that we possibly can. And that might be changing completely what we're doing. So that's kind of my little aside to what you just said, with that it is not an easy thing, but I would just like to encourage people to have that perseverance and to watch what you're doing change. And I can tell you that we're going to end on talking about this macaw data collection that we're currently doing at the Philadelphia Zoo. But this project has been as successful as it was because I failed a lot. I failed a lot before and I learned a lot. I'm a huge Star Wars fan, along with being a behavior nerd, Star Wars nerd. And my favorite quote of all time is, "The greatest teacher failure is," from Yoda. And I really just kind of keep that at my core, that even though you fail, you're going to learn from it. So these examples we're talking about have come from me doing a lot more in the past, getting data, learning what worked, learning what didn't work, learning what helped a team get on board, learning what maybe wasn't the best to get a team on board, and bringing all those things in. So I just would like to encourage people to stick with it, because you're probably not going to get it right on the first try. I really hope you do. I'm rooting for you too, but I'm sure you'll find something that you're like, next time, this is what I'll do. And then you'll get to that point where then you have this perfect recipe in order to get some great data and also get your team on board as well.
I'm so glad you said that. I love that message so much. That what was the Yoda quote? There is no
the greatest teacher failure is.
The greatest teacher failure is. I just have Yoda saying,
yeah, I could do
try.
The greatest teacher failure is.
No, I have tried. There is no try. There's only do or do. What is it? Do you know that one?
Do or do not. There is no try.
Do or do not. Anyway. Sorry, listeners. Or you're welcome. Maybe you enjoy
Yeah, we can go. Let's do some more Yoda quotes.
And this is something else you helped me realize last week as well, is that when I reflected on projects I'm currently working on, and I think about some of the big challenges that we would like to solve, and where my gut's saying we need some data here, that doesn't that you helped me say that doesn't necessarily mean that we should start a project to try to collect data by doing the hardest thing, and remind me, because at least I this when I do things, that that's not what we do. We need the small approximations. We need to set ourselves up for success. So you helped me identify a project we could work on, and then connect that with reinforcement. So for the listeners, I just think there's value in sharing. What you helped me see is that we can set up a program to collect some data and get something helpful for the keepers immediately. And that likely means that it's going to be really simple, so that they can connect the dots between effort and their own behavior and the consequence, which, as you say, we're all there to try to improve the lives of the animal, non-human learners in our care. So if some behaviors we do result in that, then I think we can start to build a good reinforcement history for a large amount of behaviors that would fall under the umbrella of data collection. But I love, and the fail thing, like I think I just want to pause for a moment, because I feel like a couple of things. It's like HR cliche buzzword, to preach to people, like failing is our friend or whatever, or Yoda quotes. But like there's just so much truth in it, and I feel like we think about data collection, we think about implementing the science and what our data collection sheet's going to look like, and how we who's going to collect the data and when. But if you don't have some underlying mindset variables, considerations, elements, like failing just provides us with more information about how to do it differently next time. Do I go as far as to say that you're potentially doomed from the start?
Yeah, I think that is completely a valid thing to say and to feel, because you just mentioned something when you were talking about, hey, like what can we get from this data and what can we get quote unquote quickly to show that this data, this resource that we're putting into getting data is something that's useful. And that's what Ryan and I were talking about with like, hey, what can you do to like show a graph to show the data to your team in a short amount of time to show like, hey, look, this is what this extra work, this is what all this hard work you're doing is leading towards, is getting us this data. Like, look at what we can glean from this. So you mentioning that, talking about failure, that is something that I learned by projects that didn't necessarily run off the ground like I thought it was. And that was a big thing for me, is realizing, you know what, it is a lot of work and it is something that we have to change in our day to find time to do. So we can reinforce ourselves at the end of it by making a change, but how do I reinforce ourselves during it? And a big part of that was figuring out a way that we can show everybody data and that basically success of what they're doing right away. So I'm glad you brought that up, because that's something that now I've kind of learned is really important. But when I was first starting this data collection journey, I wasn't necessarily focusing on, because since I was one of the ones that was leading this charge, I was reinforced just by the fact that we were doing it. But not everybody is necessarily going to be. And I can take a step back and recognize that it's kind of weird for me. And to be honest with you, 5, 6 years ago, I never would have been like, oh man, I'm so excited to go sit down on the desk, use some Power BI and come up with this graph to see this data that we have. I never really thought that would be. I was someone that I loved being with the animals and training them a really cool new behavior. But now in my career, like that's something that I find really reinforcing, but not everybody does. So finding that way to kind of give that data quickly. And even if it's not what the end goal is, just showing people that the data you're collecting is going to have some kind of physical, actionable outcome is really important. And I would highly suggest it as you continue on in your journey.
Yeah, and the great tip you gave me last week was to think about. I'd created these beautiful looking data sheets, but they were in a Google Doc, and then I hadn't got to the point of like, okay, cool, then what happens? And you suggested I automate it, so I spent the last week learning how to use Microsoft and setting up a data sheet, which then automatically populates an Excel spreadsheet, which then automatically can create graphs as well. So if a keeper puts that information in, or a staff member, or a student, or a volunteer, whoever's putting that data in, it can automatically create a um, visual stimuli that provides valuable information to help you understand you better. And so without any more effort, you've automatically potentially, everyone's an individual, but hypothetically a reinforcer for that effort. So that was genius, and I really am grateful to you for that. Let's talk about hyenas. Tell us about the hyenas.
Yeah, so this project basically came from us looking at our two hyenas and identifying a stereotypic behavior that they would do. And it would basically be they would be against the glass and would kind of roll their neck over and over again. We called it windmilling. And this was obviously a behavior that a stereotypic behavior. We want to identify what is an intervention that we can do to make that stereotypic behavior not the most reinforcing thing to do in their life. And before I move on with this little story, I do have to give another shout out to another person that has really helped me more than I can really put into words in this data collection journey, and that's Rick Hester from the Cheyenne Mountain Zoo and Behavior Works. Watching his presentations at ABMA, talking with him, Rick, I always really appreciate all the advice that he gave me. And a big thing that he kind of set me off on a different path was at the 2024 ABMA conference in Nashville, Tennessee, in the United States. We were talking at that point about hippos I was working with, because the hippos that I worked with spent a lot of time on land and not really in the water. And so that was one thing that we were trying to work on, is how can we make the water a more reinforcing place? And Rick was like, well, you need to get data on when they're spending their time, how they're spending their time. And I had mentioned to him what you had said with our day is so crazy. Like we don't have time to do that. Because in my head, getting that data is, every 15 minutes. And I remember Rick just saying, some data is so much better than no data. And if what you can do is sporadic, just get that data. If you get it for long enough, you're going to come up with something. So that was like a really great advice. And it just became something that I would get data. Some days it would be once an hour. Some days it might be once an hour until 3 p.m. And then the rest of the day was so busy, I didn't come back. Some days wouldn't get data points until 3 p.m. And by getting enough of that and that little bit, it did give us this picture. And that really set me on this path of realizing that, wow, like we need to get holistic information on our animals throughout an entire day. Because before he gave me that advice, I wouldn't have thought to go take time out of cleaning a barn to run over and see what they're doing early in the morning when typically it was a time to be cleaning, or late at night when we're closing. So it really gave me my own personal reinforcer of, okay, this is something that's really valuable to do. And this was just something that I did on my own, kind of like talked about it. We started giving the hippos more enrichment. We were able to talk with the elephant team at Busch Gardens. And when elephants were done with their giant logs, we would take it from them and we started putting it in the hippo pool. And we saw a lot of like really great changes in our hippos spending more time in the water because there was something that they wanted to use, which was, could be a playful thing, but also was really great for self-maintenance on their teeth. And so just that little bit of data showed us that small change of giving them large logs in the water did in fact increase the amount of time they spent in the water, not only interacting with it, but even afterwards, because they would get all their energy out and then rest in the water, which was exactly what we were looking for. So that was really great. And as I mentioned earlier, really set the Edge of Africa team up to take the next step, because it was just something that I started doing just on my own, just getting small data to kind of show it. And then when we saw that behavior and what we did had such a great impact on the animals and was the intervention that we were looking for, then it primed us for this hyena example. And so we had these two hyenas that were doing this stereotypic windmill. And our first thought was, before we started getting data, when are they doing it? And we typically saw it early in the morning. So we looked at the natural history of hyenas. They are generally crepuscular. So they're going to be eating first thing in the morning and late at night. So as a team, we sat down and said, you know what, let's figure out a different way to manage our day. Because typically we would shift the animals out that we needed to before the zoo opened. And then the hippo pool was our big time resource because they're hippos. We had 3 of them. We had a male. And if you've ever worked with a male hippo and their dung showers, it gets real messy. So it takes a little bit of time. And that would be what we would work on before lunch historically, because it took a lot of time and we needed it to be clean because our pools were drop and filled. Make sure we get clean water ready for the hippos for the evening. And we decided as a team, let's get creative. Let's change our mindset and try to give the hyenas more of our time early in the morning when they are more active. So we kind of changed our way. We started giving them more enrichment. We started doing our training sessions in the morning right away versus a little bit later in the afternoon. And we didn't really see a change. And that, I think, is a great example for me when I talked about earlier about us thinking what could be good. I mean, this was such a great thought. Like, I don't know who on the team mentioned that they're crepuscular, but such a great thought that we had with, you know what, let's feed them and give them what they need at the time they would be awake. Incredible thinking. However, the intervention didn't quite have the effect that we wanted. It worked sometimes. Like sometimes we would do that and then we wouldn't see that behavior, but it was still persisting. And then that's really where the thought of we need to get data. Like, let's see what they're doing, when they're doing it. Is there a pattern? Because before that, it was us just anecdotally saying, oh, we would write a note in our logbook like, hey, this morning before we got there, they were doing it, or they weren't doing it this morning, or I walked by at 10:32 and they were doing it. I walked by at 10:32 and they weren't doing it. It was a lot of anecdotal of kind of guessing when it was happening, but we didn't have that data to truly know and to know, is there a trigger? Because I think that's a big part with a stereotypic behavior is there a trigger and slash or is there a lack in their environment that goes beyond just a specific trigger? Because one of our other thoughts was, is it guest based? Is it on high traffic, heavy days? Are we seeing it more? Are we seeing it less? So that's when we really got down to this data collection. And the really big push from our team to like get on board with this both came from, I did this little hippo study and we're able to see like, oh, wow, even a little bit of data can be really great data. But also it got to a point where we had a great intervention that didn't quite work. And we just really wanted to see these animals not do this behavior. Like that was an easy one. Like sometimes stereotypic behavior, like a small pacing or a head roll maybe isn't as dramatic, but with our hyenas, like we could see that there was definitely something that was either triggering them or lacking their environment that we wanted to focus on. And so that's when this data collection came into play. And we got to this point where we need to find out if there's triggers, but also let's look at a time budget. Like what are our hyenas doing when they're not doing that? So I think that's some really great advice that I was given that I would like to pass along is when you're doing this, it is what you're looking for is what is the behavior we don't want them to see? Let's get some data on that, when it's happening, where it's happening, etc. But it's also just as important to get data on what are they doing when they're not doing it, which sounds kind of maybe not the most obvious thing, but let's get some data on what are they doing when we're not actually seeing that behavior, because that could give us a really good insight into what they're doing. And so what we did was we got a time budget. We kind of made our data to be, let's do a time budget and let's also focus on when this trigger is. Like, what is the trigger? Let's also get an activity time budget. So through this data, we found that there wasn't a trigger. It didn't matter if there were 0 people or if there were 200 people, we were still seeing this abnormal repetitive behavior. And so that's when we kind of said, okay, we had a good theory. Maybe it was guest-based, maybe it was time of day-based. Let's look at their activity budget. So we had this ethogram. We got some information on what our hyenas were doing. What we were looking for was, were they doing this abnormal repetitive behavior? Were they foraging? Were they sleeping? Were they swimming? Because our hyenas really enjoyed the water. That was something that we'd see them do quite often. Or were they locomoting? Were they moving around their habitat? Those are kind of our 5 things that we focused on because all of our enrichment kind of fell into those things. And what the really cool data that came from this was by getting that information, without even looking at the natural history of a hyena, what their activity budget is, we realized our hyenas were never sleeping during the day. And I think that's something that was eye-opening for me because I never before that moment really thought about like, let's promote sleeping. Because typically I think we think about what can we do for our animals to behave? How can they behave? Like how can we get them to forage more or longer or differently? What are these big giant things we can? But sleeping is a behavior too. And it sounds like a little reductive to say, but I didn't really think about that at that moment. So what we realized was they were not sleeping nearly as much as they should, and really at all. And so that was such an easy, great win for us from our data right away showed us, I think we figured that out within a week. We just pulled up our Excel sheet and we're like, oh, wow, there's literally almost no sleeping during the day. We would only really see it late at night when the sun was starting to go down because we had team, like the way our zoo function is, we'd have team members there typically past sunset or right at sunset. So that became like our new focus. And I think what I would like to tell people is when you're getting data and you're looking at an intervention for a behavioral challenge, it's doesn't necessarily have to be how can we quote unquote get rid of, how can we decrease this abnormal repetitive behavior. I would actually encourage you to think to yourself, what can we have like what else can we provide the animal so that they can do what they naturally would be doing? So I kind of think about it like differential reinforcement. Like, what can I do to give the animal information on what to do versus don't give them information on what not to do, give them the information on what to do. So how can we create an environment to give them something to do that is lacking in their environment? And for us, that was sleeping. Do you want me to keep talking about this?
No, I want to because I'm conscious of the time, and I want to, but I don't want to not talk about anything that we plan to talk about. But I just want to say, that's fantastic, and I love that the data helped you identify that. Having been on a massive um journey myself over the last 12 months to improve my sleep, and I collect a lot of data on my
Yeah.
sleep, and I put in interventions, and there's a whole bunch of areas of my life that I hadn't really connected to lack of quality sleep. I just love it as well because I think it's something that we don't think about often, not only like sleep, but just quality of sleep, and how much that impacts all of the things. So I love the outcome for that reason. Love the data. Love the um, consideration given at the start with regards to, as Susan would say, throwing spaghetti at the wall, and hoping something would stick. Which again, like I think it's important to acknowledge as well that there's nothing wrong with that per se. Like, we got to do the best that we can. Um, when we know better, we do better. And as I say that, I cringe because I just think a lot of us always sounds like HR buzzwords, like sayings,
Yeah.
But like it's true that, and I love also the creativeness to sit down and re as a team, especially think your routine. I'm thinking, Shane, about my co-pilot here, Phoebe Dog. And for so long, because she's smaller than our cats, uh, for so long I have felt restricted in the amount of training sessions I can do with her throughout a day because of her size and the quantity of food she's got. But I just last week sat down and rethought it all, and without giving her any less food, just created multiple opportunities. And sometimes I think we get stuck in our ways of like this is how we do things, this is how we've always done things. Um, but there's always a third alternative. That's a book actually by Stephen R. Covey, The Habits of Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. This is called The Third Alternative. Like there's always a different way of doing things. There's so much from your story that I love. But let's park all of those thoughts because they're probably all podcast episodes in and of themselves. And I'd love to have you share with our podcast audience about your current project with the McCaws as well. And thank you so much for sharing about the hyenas.
Yeah, of course. And I guess I also, to wrap that up, want to say that that data collection was just once every 30 minutes. And because we made it very simple, it was really easy for one of us just to run out and look at the habitat. And sometimes you would get halfway down the pathway, you could see what they were doing and walk right back to what you were doing. So I think it's also, like you mentioned, just getting creative and thinking of just how can we make this work and change our habits, like really had a big impact. And I can also tell you all that because we figured out that they weren't sleeping, we were able to provide them an intervention in their habitat to allow them to sleep more. And it was a success. We saw them sleeping a whole lot more during the day, and we saw a reduction in that abnormal repetitive behavior. So a great win for data. But as you mentioned, moving away from those hyenas to the macaws that I'm currently working with. So this is a really great story. And I first have to shout out the Kids U team at the Philadelphia Zoo for just being absolute rock stars. We currently have this little program going on at the Philadelphia Zoo right now where we're getting some communication and leadership learning as a zoo. And in that, the person leading it said, like, hey, like, what's a time that you're proud to work at the zoo? Like, let's talk about it. Like, what are the positive things? And for me, it was watching this team completely just take this big project on with getting data, 24-hour surveillance data on these macaws in order to provide them with an absolute increase in their welfare and getting creative with their lives. And it was just so amazing to watch this team completely just say, you know what, this is a lot. As we mentioned earlier in the podcast, it's a big resource. It's daunting. It's going to change the way that we operate throughout our day. And just for them to take it on completely and to go feet first in was really amazing. So shout out to the Kids UU team and everyone involved with that. But basically, we have these two macaws. Their names are Machu and Pichu, which I think are incredibly cute names. They're brother and sister. And we started to see them do a behavior that was not desired. And basically, this behavior started happening. And when we first started through this process, we were getting ethograms, but they were really in depth. They had a lot of specific parts to it. And we were really only getting the data for a certain part of the day, like the time of the day that we had the ability to watch them, which, like I just mentioned a second ago, it almost sounds like I'm contradicting myself. It still is good. And that is great. However, from that data, we really weren't able to deem the information that we needed. And so the next step with that was, let's look at their activity budget through the whole day. And also let's find out when they're doing this, because this was a behavior that wasn't always happening when we were right there. And we would be away from them, come back, and there's evidence that this behavior had happened. So let's get footage on them to see when it's happening, especially because with the thought that our animals have a relationship with us. So our presence there is also going to change what they're doing. So we set up an overnight camera, and then we set up a GoPro throughout the day, and we started getting 24-hour footage on them. And as Ryan was mentioning earlier, a really big part of this was setting up an automated collection system. So we created a Microsoft form that when you're watching the data, every time you saw this behavior happening, you open up the form and you put in all this information. And we had the time it was happening, who was doing it, where they were, what they were doing right before it, what were they doing right after it, the intensity of it, all this information. So you're getting a lot of data on what that was. And by getting this data, we started to be able to start recognizing certain patterns in it. And then we also started getting, and I think a big part too was by doing this really holistic approach to their lives, like looking at a 24-hour lifespan, also let us like think bigger too with, okay, like let's start looking at every aspect of their day. So we started thinking like, oh, like what can we do in their habitat? Like what can we provide them that maybe could be a little different, or what can we do differently here because we have this mindset of 24-hour. And what I think was really interesting was I promise you this doesn't always happen, but it was the sleep again. It sounds crazy, but we noticed that overnight they were awake a lot, and we were seeing this behavior when they were awake. And that was such valuable information. And we got that within a week of getting data. As we started, as everyone was watching the footage, we're like, wow, like they really are awake a lot at night. Like this is when we're seeing it. And I mentioned earlier that a really big key was having a system where you can see that data really quickly, get reinforced by it, and be able to use it. And by automating it, it's a great way that you can just take all that information, you can hit, export, make a graph within 3 minutes, and you can really have a clear picture. And so from that sleeping, we started thinking like, what are ways that maybe in their habitat we can look at? And we started then saying, let's go cut some bamboo and put bamboo in their habitat. And one, that'll help with humidity to get their humidity up. And then also two, like maybe this will provide them with things to do, because our initial thought was, let's put the bamboo up and maybe they'll spend time shredding it, moving through it, and it'll kind of get their energy out. And I think that's another thing I want to point out is that you asked earlier about the importance of data collection. And I think part of it is because we can have all these hypotheses and things that we think are going to work, and they're great ideas and great thoughts, but not until we watch the animals and get that data is their behavior truly going to tell us. Because we thought, okay, this will be a great part of their habitat. They'll have to climb around it more. They can shred it. It's going to spend more energy, and thus hopefully they'll sleep more. Great thought, sound hypothesis. But then what we noticed was, I think, even cooler. We put this bamboo up and we noticed that they started hiding behind it and sleeping. They didn't need it as something to do and all these things. What they needed was they needed a place to not feel out in the open. I'm putting this into their brains, but what the data with watching their behavior is they just needed that little section to be able to like feel, safe, secure, hide behind it. And I remember that we were talking and we're like, oh yeah, they're not really interacting with the bamboo. However, what I would like, we kind of talked about was like, hey, let's challenge ourselves a little bit. Are they not interacting with the bamboo, or are they not interacting in the way that we thought they would? And that's what data collection really showed us, is that act, that intervention was actually super valuable because they were sleeping behind it. And I remember one time it was this really great situation where we had this data, the bamboo had to get taken down, it was getting old. As happens at a zoo, something happened. We didn't really have a chance to go get new stuff. We got that 24-hour data and we noticed they went right back to not sleeping. So it was a really great data point for us to say, you know what, this was really helpful. This was worth it. Put the bamboo up, then we started seeing them sleep. I remember one of my coworkers being really excited to be like, hey, guess what? The bamboo worked. Like the data is showing us that us putting the bamboo up was an intervention that was helping them sleep more, and thus we were seeing that decrease in that unwanted behavior that we were seeing. So I think that was the really big goal about, like, huge part about this 24-hour surveillance. And I know that I'm saying this, trust me, I've been there. I understand that not everyone has that opportunity to do it. We had a really great team and a really great situation where we're able to get that data and watch for that long. And then the second part about this 24-hour collection that really allowed us to have targeted, actionable interventions that are based on the animal's behavior was, because we were getting 24 hours, we were able to see patterns. And one pattern that we started to notice was we're seeing them do this behavior first thing in the morning, because, we show up and there's so many signals that we're there and resources are coming. Our keys unlock doors, our voices are talking, all lights might come on, all these things. And so by getting this data, we were then able to change what we talked about a second ago, is let's change our way. Like, let's change what we're doing. And so it was really awesome that our directors got on board with it. The team got on board with it, where we said, you know what, the very first thing we're going to do in the morning is we are going to go and get resources to the macaws, which for them looked like we go in, they step up, we weigh them, we can give them their breakfast, we do a training session with them first thing right away. As soon as we did that intervention, we saw them basically extinguish that behavior happening first thing in the morning. And we wouldn't have known that without getting data. And we wouldn't have known that it was working without having that baseline beforehand. So all those are really great things that can help us have that intervention. And then now we're at a point where we have gotten so much data, we've spent time with them, that we know what is triggering these behaviors and when it's happening. And now our interventions can be super targeted towards them and following their behaviors. Because I also tell you, we talk about failing. We've tried a lot of interventions. We've tried a lot of different things, and it's all about just being flexible, listening to the animals, listening to their behavior, seeing what you're seeing in the data and adjusting. And sometimes it can be frustrating. It can be disheartening, where you come up with this big thing, you try it, and then because you have the data, you notice it's not really working. But imagine if you didn't have that data, you would just keep trying and not really know. So that's why I think it's so important. And once again, just complete shout out to the entire team at the Kids Zoo U team at the Philadelphia Zoo for just really going into this and being on board with getting it. And I think I can speak for all of us in saying that we know these macaws really well now, because we have this data. We can really give them what they need as individuals a lot better.
Yeah, Meg, and the thing that I'm thinking about, and lots of things, obviously, but the thing that I'm thinking about right now, and has been kind of competing in my mind of going, listen to Shane, and it's my voice has been like, but what about this idea? What about this idea? And the thing is that throwing the spaghetti at the wall, so to speak, coming up with lots of interventions, enrichment items, schedule changes, training. Uh, Again, nothing wrong with that. It's all good. But it all takes time. And it's making me reflect on the hardness. How hard is it to learn the new skills required to set up Microsoft Forms? And how hard is it to learn uh, the different types of uh, data collection sheets that you can make and where they are appropriate and where they're not appropriate, and to go through the failing and learn. And what takes more time? What takes more time is it the actual throwing spaghetti at the wall, and or is it learning a new thing, getting the data, and what produces the best outcome? And it's in my mind going, well, it actually probably takes less time to learn how to do data collection. Again, I always am worried about sounding like I'm up on my high horse or like I'm talking like so romantically about ideas that aren't acknowledging the challenges and the friction points that people will face. But I think that you bring a really great example of implementing it. So well done.
Yeah, and I would also say that like the spaghetti on the wall, great phrase and great makes a lot of sense versus the taking the time to get the data. Another really great part of that was it can really get your team excited about something because it sounds crazy, but when you get that data and then your team's starting to talk about, oh, like, did you see the intervention we did? Look at that positive outcome. Like, let's keep doing it. Let's keep going with that. Or, hey, that didn't work. It almost makes failure just a part of the process versus a defeating thing. Oh man, that intervention didn't work, but we saw that it didn't work, so we're going to stop it. And what's our next thing we're going to try? I think just this whole mindset can really just change your culture to this, like, let's keep tinkering to see what that win is going to be. And it kind of helps you instead of just saying, oh yeah, that one didn't work, but at least we know it. And it's almost like a weird way that knowing it didn't work makes it kind of work. That kind of sounds a little backwards, but as long as you have that data to see that that wasn't an intervention that was actionable and showed the outcome that you're hoping for, that's also a success because now you can cross it off of your whiteboard and you can move on to the next one. And that's been a really cool thing for me in all of these situations that I've been able to do data collection is watching the team just get excited about the data in a way that maybe they wouldn't before because they can see it and they can see what they're doing has that positive impact on the animal's life. And then the teamwork it takes everybody together because this is a big project. And by all of us working together, we can collaborate to get the data collected and then also come up with that intervention.
Yeah, and if you define success as more information, then it's all success.
Mm-hmm.
Shane, before we wrap up, we always ask people to share what they would like to see happen over the next 5 to 10 years in the enrichment, data collection, animal training. You pick. What and as the someone who's got the seat of the ABMA podcast, I think you got to. I think this gives us podcast hosts this unique perspective on the industry and industries that we might be working across. I'm really interested to hear what you're thinking about where we are and what you want to see happen.
I think because it's so hard to think about in the next 5 to 10 years because truthfully, if you would have let's think about 10 years ago from 2016. Welfare assessments and the word welfare was barely in our vocabulary as a zoological, at least in the United States. We weren't really focusing on this science part of it. But now it is such a big part of what we do. So I think it's really exciting to think about like what is that next thing that we're going to realize like, hey, this is our next big push. But I think one thing that I can think about in the next 5 to 10 years that I would love to see happen is that the science of what we're doing, be that the science of behavior change, the science of welfare, the science of behavior collection, and being able to, everyone can put this into a data and come up with a great graph, the science of technology and using technology with all of our habitats and enrichment and training help, all of those things, that information just becomes more common And the way it becomes more common is figuring out ways that we can spread that data. It's like it comes right back to the beginning of the podcast that I can look back and be so fortunate that I grew up in this field with Wouter Stallard as my mentor and teaching me all of this. So that's kind of my dream for the future, is that this information can get out to everybody. And I think from ABMA, like, we have a lot of people that are members that don't work at a large institution. Like, they're maybe at a rehab center, they're in a shelter, they're at a nature center, and they find ABMA because it is just a world that they don't have all those backbones. Because a lot of us in zoos have some kind of backbone and support at our institution with that, but finding ways that all this information can get out to everybody and that everyone has the access to be able to learn it in the way that they best learn, and then they can then start applying it. Because once we all can get this more grasp of that knowledge, only then can we really start saying, hey, let's change the way we make habitats. Hey, let's change the way that we just think about how we care for animals. A big one for me is just, let's teach animals to do everything in their lives, no matter what it is. A large lion injection train, but like, let's also look at all these smaller animals that we can hold in our hands and they can get an injection, but let's give them the same control and choices that we give these large megafauna as well. So all that comes down to finding ways that we can all connect more and that we can all learn together.
Beautiful. Beautifully said. Thank you, the listeners of this show. I know we've got a little bit over the standard hour today, but I definitely wanted to get...
That's my bad as a podcast host, just talking and talking.
Well, luckily, that's what podcasts. So this podcast is all about, and I just because those two specific examples I thought would have a lot of value for our listeners. So I really wanted to ensure that even though we went a little bit longer than normal, we fit those in today. For the listeners of the show, though, if they wanted to, and maybe they haven't heard about ABMA before, if they wanted to find out about ABMA, where would they go? If there's anything for Philadelphia Zoo that you want to plug, and maybe if they wanted to reach out to you, Shane, how would they go about getting in touch?
Yeah, well, I'll start with me. You can reach me on email at abc@theabma.org. That's the podcast email, so all that goes to me. I'd love to be able to chat with anybody. If you are having these data questions, I would love to help you out. I'm still learning a lot. I just spent the ABMA conference with Joey Golden from the Baltimore Zoo. We sat down for an hour and he taught me Power BI. So I'm really happy to share all the things that I have learned through that. And for ABMA, we do have a website. It's www.theabma.org. A lot of really great resources on there that you can check out. And we do have quite a bit of resources that are available for everyone. So we have a glossary of terms, which if you're really looking to jump into the science is a great starting point because it gives you that scientific information about it. We have our quarterly publication with other training and enrichment and behavior successes you can check out. So a great resource there. And then for the Philadelphia Zoo, just a shout out that this is the 250th anniversary of Philadelphia existing as a city. So lots of really great, exciting things going on this year. So if you're coming to Philadelphia Zoo, reach out to me and we can meet up because I'm always excited to talk to other behavior nerds.
So Philadelphia was founded at the same time as your constitution?
The United States, yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, interesting. Well, we will link to all of that in the show notes, of course. We really appreciate you, Shane, and the work you're doing through Philadelphia Zoo for the macaws and the other animals that live there and through the ABMA, and for taking time to come and hang out with us at Animal Training Academy. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ryan. Thanks, everybody.
And thank you so much for listening as well. This is your host, Ryan Cartlidge, signing off from this episode of the Animal Training Academy podcast show. We hope today's conversation inspired you and equipped you with new tools for your trainer's toolbox. Remember, every challenge in training is an opportunity to learn and sharpen your animal training geekery. Embrace the rough patches, learn from them, and keep improving. And don't forget, The path to growing your skills and expanding your knowledge continues beyond this episode. Visit www.atamember.com to join our supportive membership, where you will find a community of trainers just like you. Together, we're making a huge positive difference in the lives of animal and human learners worldwide. Until next time, keep honing your skills, stay awesome, and remember, every interaction with an animal or human learner is your opportunity to create ripples. We're here cheering you on every step of the way. See you at the next episode.